Give Katie a very warm welcome.
Thanks. It's a real treat to be with you. Oh, good. Yay. I can stumble through things without a deck, but it's much better with a deck. So thank you. So we're going to talk today about sort of who the ARC is. Many of you know the ARC from your own communities, and that's a wonderful thing. Our role in public policy over the years, and sort of what we're doing now in this unique time frame in our nation's history. So I've been at the ARC for about 18 months, and one of the reasons I wanted to come was the ARC's commitment to advocacy. The ARC has about 600 chapters, 582 to be exact. Not all of them provide direct services to people with disabilities. In fact, about 70% of our chapters do advocacy only. And one of the key elements of being a chapter of the ARC is you have to do public policy advocacy. So all of our state chapters, and as you all in Washington know what the great work that Stacy's doing, is really being that arm between to connect people with disabilities and their families to policymakers so that they can understand the pragmatic realities of life. So we have at the national office two big priorities within the umbrella or under the umbrella of advocacy. One is to protect the integrity of the Medicaid program, and the second is to protect the rights of kids with disabilities to get the education services that the federal law entitles them to. I will leave out on the table, but we have this ginormous public policy agenda. It's 58 pages long, and no one should read it except I have to. And so we do this, and it'll be, the link is in the deck that you will have. But we do it in partnership with 8 other organizations. And we've done this for about, I think, 15 years or so that the IDD community can speak with one voice. And so we just redid our, and let me, before I go there. So it's really everything you could ever dream of. So we have these priority areas, everything from civil rights, education, Medicaid, healthcare, Social Security. And then we have other critical issues, which include housing, family support, things that happen to nonprofits, technology. And it's not really fair to say that one is more of a priority than another because they're all priorities, hence the 58 pages. So it really does give a good background. We just redid the health policy one because we wanted to make sure before the change in administration, I mean, it was done before the change in administration, that our health policy was especially inclusive to reproductive health when it comes to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we've been at this a long time. I think Stacy said that the ARC here in Washington was created in the 40s. I may not get that right, but the ARC of the U.S. was established in 1950, and we were started by parents of kids with disabilities. Many of these families had kids that didn't have disabilities, and these families had the audacity to want all of their kids to live at home and be part of a family and go to school and get a job and live in the community. And they thought that was what was important to them as families. So one of the sort of landmark things that the ARC did was parents and the ARC in Pennsylvania took the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to court to get the right for their kids to go to the public schools. That and another case in Washington, D.C., the Mills case, were among the primary incentives of Congress taking action on, and establishing the federal, what was then called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, and now is known as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Families associated with the ARC helped close 2 of our major largest institutions for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, Pennhurst in Pennsylvania, and Willowbrook in New York. And those were places that you wouldn't want your neighborhood rats to live in, let alone a family member. And so the ARC has been instrumental. And again, for me, it all comes back to family. It's what do you want for your family? What are your expectations for your family? And families associated with the ARC wanted to be families, wanted to be cohesive families, and wanted, if they didn't have the supports that their family member needed, they went out and created a way to make it happen. The ARC was instrumental in enacting the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is where I started my job many moons ago, working for my home state senator, Tom Harkin. The ARC was instrumental, and I love the conversation about, I will never say I love the conversation about 14C, it's sub-minimum wage, because you can't do that because it's such an awful conversation. But we've put in place policies over the years to try to make it so the pipeline of people going into sheltered work is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. One of the things we did in the early 2000s was when Congress decided there needed to be an accountability system for the academic achievement of all kids through the infamous No Child Left Behind, the ARC and others went to Congress and said, if you're going to have an accountability system, it has to include all kids. And it was in that piece of legislation, building on previous IDEA legislation, that we said kids with disabilities have access to the general curriculum. That means they have the right to be taught the same stuff everybody else does. They are given a chance to try, whereas before it was assumed they couldn't, and these laws changed the dynamic so that they would be given a chance and the supports necessary to try. The ARC was also instrumental in creating the Support and Employment Program within the Vocational Rehabilitation Act, and worked really hard, especially on the insurance market reforms that were a part of the Affordable Care Act, the things that had your kid on your insurance till they were 26, no limits on for pre-existing conditions, no lifetime caps, all the things that really made people with disabilities and their families stuck because you couldn't change a job if you had a family member with a disability because of a pre-existing condition exclusion. If all the things that people couldn't do because they made so many decisions based on the current insurance plan that they had. And upending that apple cart was something that just couldn't happen. So we've been doing this a long time. We're still doing it. So what are we talking about right now? And we've heard a lot about Medicaid. I'm going to talk a little bit about education. And I'll have to admit, I was in the previous administration at the Department of Education working on strategies to help improve options for kids with disabilities in our public school. So what does the Department of Education do? It makes sure that the state grant funds under the three big state grant programs, the Part B, the K-12 state grant program, the preschool state program, and the early intervention state grant program, that those all get to states in a timely way. The department does a lot of technical assistance to states, whether it's formal or informal. One of the things that was profound to me when I was in the department during COVID was the significant turnover of people at every level of education. And I think that's true in government in general, but state commissioners, state superintendents, local school district superintendents, principals, teachers, the turnover in education was so profound that the people who were filling those roles didn't necessarily have the content expertise they needed to know what their role really required of them. And so the Department of Education was a place where we could help bring them along, help them know what tools had already been created, to provide them with assistance, to answer basic questions, to connect them with resources in their state. The department funds a lot of training of new teachers, that a lot of grant funding to universities to create special education teachers who have a high level of skill. The department, through the Office for Civil Rights, investigates specific complaints of disability discrimination. And then if any one of you would ever have a question, you could write a letter to the secretary and somebody would answer it. Those are all just really basic functions of the department. So this year has been a little different than most. It was a parlor game we were playing in February and March of, was it today the day that they were going to drop the executive order to dismantle the Department of Education? And that went on for about 6 weeks. And just when we thought maybe they weren't, on March 11th, they announced that they were laying off half of the staff. Without a plan, without a purpose, just that they were going to dismantle the Department of Education because it was no longer necessary, even though it was created by an act of Congress, and certain elements within the department, like the Office of Special Education Programs and the Rehabilitation Services Administration, were created by federal law. So you can't just not have them unless you change the law. 11 days later, the executive order finally dropped, and it called for the specific dismantling of the department and moving some functions, and they called them the special needs functions, going to the Department of Health and Human Services. And we had anticipated that that was coming, and then it was going to go to the Administration for Community Living, which Sharon helped create, except they blew that up before they did that, so it was unclear where it was going to go. Later that month, we at the ARC participated by providing a declaration to a lawsuit that was filed in Massachusetts with some school districts and some teachers' unions, saying that the Trump administration had not followed the Administrative Procedures Act. Anyway, they couldn't just dismantle this without a plan, without thought. And then last month, the judge ruled in favor that, in fact, the department, the administration had not done the things that they would need to do, and that they needed to reinstate the nearly 2,000 employees that had been let go. They are appealing that, and we're still very much at the beginning of this. But it's a dance that we are doing, and I think someone said it earlier, that using the courts is one tool that we may have used in the past that I think, sadly, we are going to need to be using more in the future, because it's a potential way to stop things that are just simply inconsistent with what the law requires. The last thing I will say is there's a provision in the House budget bill that has, it's called the Education Choice for Children Act. And this is basically a federal voucher program. There's nobody here from Texas, but my friend from Iowa knows all too well that states and state legislatures are considering increasing the ability of families to take public funds and use them in private schools. And that's a choice they can make. My concern is states have an obligation to educate every child who resides in their state. That's a requirement under almost every state's constitution. They say that's one of the things we do. IDEA says if you educate one child, you got to educate all the children, and then spells out specific things that need to happen for children with disabilities. And my concern is if you take out a huge chunk of the public money from public education, and you still have this obligation to kids with disabilities, but you have no way to deliver on that obligation, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. And so this, from a federal policy level, would encourage states to do that and give them more money to do it. But it doesn't change the fact that states have to meet the needs of these kids, and it doesn't change the fact that not every private school will take kids with high needs. They just won't, right? They are not designed for that. They don't want those kids. They don't want to pay for the extra services, and yet those kids have a right to an education. So 2 years ago in Texas, they fought off a big voucher bill And it was Republicans in rural districts who said, if you blow up the public school, there is not a private school that's going to take all these kids. Many of those people were not reelected. And so there's I think a real concern that we have that as people look at private schools and thinking, what's wrong with that? Don't we want everyone to go to the best school? That's a way of thinking of it. But another way of thinking about it is if you have an obligation to all kids, you've got to have a way to meet that obligation. And if you take all the money out of the public school, or you take 50 or 60 or 70, in Iowa, 90% of the funds can now go to private schools. That doesn't leave much for the people who don't have a private school in their community, or for whom the private school in their community won't take them. So that's just something to keep an eye on, and it's something that that some of the more conservative legislatures, ALEC and others, are really pushing. Again, it's parent choice. Choice is a great word. We all like choice, but choice doesn't. That choice doesn't mean that everybody can choose, right? And that choice doesn't acknowledge that there are real obligations that exist that we need to be able to act on. So yeah, what does all this mean? Well, I went too fast. So with the demise of the Department of Education, which we hope doesn't happen, we're going to have fewer investigations of discrimination on cases involving kids with disabilities. Right now, for the last several years, the largest number of complaints have been involving kids with disabilities that OCR has investigated. And OCR didn't have enough staff before, and they were having investigators do like 40 cases. Now that's probably close to 120 per one individual, which means everything's going to take longer. Doesn't mean you can't get it. You just can't necessarily get it in the time that's going to make a difference in that child's life. If you have a question, it's going to take a whole lot longer to get an answer. And we don't, are they going to continue to flow the public funds in accordance with the federal law? They should. They're legally obligated to. That doesn't mean that we have confidence that that's what they're going to do. We were talking about this last night. The brain drain of really, really, really competent technical experts that have left the federal government this year is just terrifying. People who really know the process, the content, how to deliver good technical assistance, how to help states do what they want to do, but they may not know how. That's going to be greatly diminished. And that we're left with legal challenges to stop it, which is not a place that, we certainly didn't wake up one day and say, gosh, we hope everyone sues the administration to stop these things from happening. But that is one of the tools that's available to us, and we have to use them when they are there. All right, so I talked about that. So Medicaid, you've heard about Medicaid today. We're going to talk a little more. So in our public policy agenda drives what we do, and we just revised our position on health. And it's very simple, even though it's got all this nuance where if you see our agenda, you can see it. One of the things we've been doing for the last 8 months is really trying to get people to understand that the decisions are made at two different levels. They're federal decisions and they're state decisions. And you guys are all super well-versed in the state decisions. But, Congress sets who's eligible, how is it financed, what are mandatory services, what are optional services, and the state does that in order to get their funding. States can always do more, right? States can always do more, but they have to meet that baseline. So I think I went too far. Yeah, so we've talked about a little bit about what was in the bill that the House passed at the end of last month. And I will note it was passed by one vote. It adds the couple things that we are mostly concerned about. It adds work requirements for people that are in the expansion population. It adds new requirements that you have to renew your eligibility every 6 months instead of once a year. And it takes 700 to 800 billion with a B dollars out of the system. So yuck, right? That's not what I think any of us would have wanted. And when we thought, how do we try to get this when the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the White House? I think both Rachel and Sharon said it, and it's certainly been my experience over many, many years. Disability's always been bipartisan, and it's because Republicans have family members with disabilities, Democrats have family members, independents, everybody, if you help them connect the dots, knows somebody, cares about somebody, has somebody in their circle that they care about that has a disability. And they know kind of what their lives are like. And so is it making life harder for those things in our national interest? And they would probably say no, right? But it's trying to get them to articulate what their priorities are. And it's been our job to try to help them see that some of these policies are really dangerous. So I want to just do a little bit of social studies for you in that the margins of control that the Republicans have are very narrow. So the House bill passed 215 to 214. They lost a couple Republicans, and there had been a couple deaths on the Democratic side. So it passed by one vote. That's not a comfortable margin. In the Senate, the Republicans have a 4-seat margin, which means if you're looking to influence these bills, you don't have to do all 53 Republicans. You got to get 4, right? Or 5 or 6, right? You don't have to boil the ocean to get the job done. And that's been our strategy. So we've been doing it the old school way. One person at a time, one member, connecting them with their local ARC chapters and advocates. We've made a target list of people that have a great relationship with our chapters or with our advocates. We are doing everything in our power to make sure every piece of information that goes out of our office is squeaky accurate, right? Because we don't have political action committee. We're not giving members contributions to their campaigns. What we have is access to real people with real stories who live in their districts. And that is real power. And you guys know real people with real stories who live in your districts. We are also talking exclusively about this is the policy and these are the outcomes of the policy. We're not getting into people's motivation. I don't really care what their motivation is. If they vote the right way, bring it on. And so we're seeing some kind of unique things happening right now. There's a senator from Missouri, Josh Hawley, who's up for a very tough reelection race next year. Missouri is one of a handful of states that has a law that says if Congress changes the amount of money that they would pay for the expansion group, that the state would have to make up that cost. And the state's doesn't want to do that. So they would have to do some dramatic things. He's also, and this is me not knowing the facts, but he's got a very tough race. And the number of people in his state that rely on Medicaid is larger than the percentage that he won by last time. And so I think people are looking at Medicaid cuts in a different way this time because each race is important. No one can afford to lose, and the power structure is predicated on that. So it's very interesting. One of the other things I would say, one of the Republicans that we've been working very, very, very closely with, talked to him last week, and he said, look, there were things that started as options to be in the House bill, per capita caps, changing the federal payment structure, block grants that some in Congress really wanted in this bill. Those aren't in the bill. Now, these other things, they're horrible, don't get me wrong. But on the scale of horrible, block grants, per capita caps, changing the federal payment, those are way more horrible than the others. The others are horrible. It's all bad. But it could have been worse, and that's in large part because they were hearing from advocates who said you can't just do this axe to the Medicaid program. So one of the things we want you to know is that one of the talking points that you will hear over and over and over again is that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have been protected. There's no harm in this bill to them, and that's simply not the case. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities come to the Medicaid program in a variety of ways, and not everyone that has an intellectual and developmental disability has the service needs that makes them eligible under the supplemental security income definition. And so that's a real concern. So if someone says to you, "We got you covered," that's not an accurate statement. When you take $700 or $800 billion out of the Medicaid system, that is really bad for the health system, right? So what you're going to see is provider reimbursement rates, and if you think about, I'm sure there's not a provider group in your state that thinks that their Medicaid reimbursement rate is as high as it should be, right? Said no one. That's only going to get tighter, right, if you have to take a bunch of money out. So that means fewer pediatricians to see kids with Down syndrome that have heart conditions. It's going to be fewer physical therapists helping kids with CP gain their strength so that they can sit up and go to school. All of those things are going to be harder to find with less money. And then I think one of the big things that people are very concerned about are rural hospitals. And what happens to a community when that hospital, which not only is the center for healthcare, but is a huge employer in many of these smaller communities, what happens there? And I think for pregnant women who want to have a baby in a hospital, that to have to not, some people know when they're going to have a baby, and sometimes those babies just come, right? And so the distance somebody would have to travel, that gets to be a concern. One of the other things that we're seeing that we're really concerned about, the work requirements, is based on Arkansas and Georgia. Arkansas did it several years ago. They ended up spending more money on the administrative side than they actually collected in savings. And there are lots of, and Sharon talked about it this morning, what it takes to set up a new system to do this for these many people is not something you can just flip a switch and have it be done, and have it be done with integrity. It's not that easy, it's not cheap, and you can't do it quickly without making mistakes. We're also concerned about what it means for other populations. One of our chapters in a blue state with a blue governor, they had some administrative issues and people were getting dropped from Medicaid, but they didn't know it, and our chapter that was providing them services didn't know it until they got the refusal for the bill, and they are floating the state for $7 million this year because of paperwork issues and not communicating with the provider. So all of those things are not real big confidence boosters as we look to a state trying to implement a major new work requirement administrative procedure. So a couple of things, and then I'll wrap up. What we're hearing, I mentioned one, that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are protected. They're not going to be harmed in any way. Everyone understands that's not accurate. That the motivator for some of these changes in the Medicaid program was to fight waste, fraud, and abuse. And they are saying that the work requirements is to do that. I don't know how you get there, but that's the straight line that some are trying to say. That these changes are going to sustain Medicaid, right? The savings from Medicaid, because we're doing these things, are not going back into the Medicaid program, right? They're not going back into the Medicaid program. And again, people with disabilities, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities come to Medicaid through a bunch of different doors. And it is not just people that meet the SSI definition that are on Medicaid. So my last joyful slide on this topic is, you know, and I think Sharon was said it this morning, like, what's the plan? Well, we hope that our advocacy, our collective advocacy, can make the harms that are in the House bill less bad by the time it comes out of the Senate and a final bill is presented to the president. But this is shifting a lot of costs to the state. Just no way around it. And states can do fun things like increase taxes, right? Everybody wants to do that. Looking at reducing optional services, right? Home and community-based services are optional services. It's also about, and I'll pick on Texas one more time just because I was there a couple months ago. Texas has like a $20 billion surplus and 170,000 people on home community-based services waiting lists. They could fix that tomorrow. They have other plans for that surplus. And so I think it's talking to your governor's office about what are our priorities. And I think at the end of the day, you know, budgets are about priorities. And for us at the ARC, we want to make sure people with disabilities can live in a home with the people they love and be safe and supported and engaged in the community, whatever that means for them, right? And having less money in the Medicaid system makes that just that much more difficult. So we're doing a lot, and it feels really good, but we know we're not anywhere close to the end. So we have a team of lobbyists on the Hill that are on the Hill every day. In the last 4 months, they've done more than 100 visits to Republicans, trying to make that connection. We had an annual goal this year of 200,000 actions to Congress. We crossed that mark in March, and we did 300,000 the end of May. And I am buying everyone drinks when we get to 500,000, so we're excited about that. We are collecting stories. We did a rally last month, a 24-hour rally in front of the Capitol, and there were about 10 different organizations that did this, and they read over the course of 24 hours 2,500 stories about people who rely on Medicaid. 800 of those 2,500 came from the ARC. And this is the ARC of the U.S. staff plus some of our chapters. But it was, you know, people are not staying home and not being engaged. And we're connecting advocates and chapters with these targeted members. I want them to be really uncomfortable if they have to vote for a bill that's bad. I want them to look people in the eye and understand what their day-to-day is, and that if really that's the person whose life we want to make harder, if that's really what your priority is, I want you to be really uncomfortable. Not a little bit, like really uncomfortable. And that only happens when we are tenacious and consistent and ongoing with our advocacy. Some of our chapters have been doing some really cool things. The ARC of Minnesota did a rally at their state capitol with all of the DD groups and with state representatives talking about how important the service system is for people with developmental disabilities. Our folks have been going to the town halls that are happening. This one was our exec in Nebraska, who basically said, I work with people with disabilities, and we are the current system isn't meeting their needs now. How will less money make it better? And it's a fair question, right? It's a fair question. Our chapters are cooking with gas in getting the word out through the media. And this is just a snapshot of a handful of things that we've done over the last couple weeks. So we have some resources for you. We have on our website, and the link is in the deck, and you know you're a geek when you get really excited about a toolkit, but we have a really cool toolkit. That is everything you need, state fact sheets on a lot of the issues, and that's available on our website. We also are adding some new things, and hope by next week that we will have new resources on there. We are also adding to our activities advocacy for the Supplemental Nutrition Program, SNAP, because shockingly, people with developmental disabilities need health care and food. So we are doing that, and the cuts to SNAP are pretty scary as well. One of the things we could ask you guys to do is follow us on social media. We are doing alerts, actions, updates all the time, and it's really the best way to keep up to date. It also it's the fastest way that we're getting the word out. And then lastly, sort of where are we, right? So this is where my sports analogy comes up. So the House passed its version of their budget bill on May 22nd. The Senate is now debating it. They some are indicating, the leadership has indicated they wanted their version done by July 4th, which is 2 weeks from Saturday. I don't see how that's possible, but that's what they're trying for. The Senate bill will be different from the House bill. So they're going to have to reconcile them into one bill, pass it on both sides, and then send it to the president. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to slow it down. And that's what we're really hoping to do. When I said that I don't care what people's motivations are, I really don't. Some members are really worried about the cuts to Medicaid, genuinely so. They don't want to see that. Other members are really horrified at the size of our national deficit. And I can understand that. People forget, and I loved Sharon's grid of sort of where we were, and especially with 2008, 2009, and then with COVID. You know, COVID, the federal government printed a lot of money and sent it out to keep people whole. So they didn't lose their apartments. They didn't lose their insurance, that their businesses, they were able to weather the storm. And now they're shocked and amazed that our deficit's bigger. Right? There's a reason our deficit was bigger. It was a global pandemic that I don't think the average Joe could plan for. In 2020, I'm going to have 2 years of operating revenue in place because we might have a global pandemic that will shut everything down, right? Said no one. But that's where we are. And like every crisis, you know, we need to be planful of how we get through it. But taking $800 billion out of the Medicaid program, at least to us at the ARC, seems like the wrong approach. So I am actually, I'm somewhere between optimistic and hopeful. I think optimistic is higher than hopeful, but so I'm more than hopeful, not yet optimistic. But we're doing great stuff. The collective, we are doing great stuff. And people are working every day to try to get the word out. We are also talking to governors. I mean, governors, as you know, some of your governors that are super conservative still know they need to balance the budget every year. And they don't want to see rural hospitals closed. They don't want to see rural schools closed. Those folks, they know, don't have a lot of options. And so I think it's up to us to try to both quietly and not quietly to have those conversations with decision makers so that they understand, that you understand, that we understand that there are real consequences to these policies that I don't think are good for anyone, regardless of their political stripes. And I think we're making progress. Right? We just are. have we crossed the finish line and run through the ribbon? And no, but we're still in the race, and we're still doing it, and there's still reason to hope that we can make this bill and this process better, and that people with disabilities won't be asked to be at the front of line to make their contribution for fiscal responsibility before everybody else does. So let me stop there. I know I'm between you and lunch, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Good morning. I have a question. I don't think the ARC is in Arkansas. I don't think.
We don't have a state chapter there. We have some locals.
Oh, it's local?
Yeah.
Like
and I can
countywide?
Yeah, I can get that for you.
Okay. And do y'all have, somebody mentioned earlier about fighting some of these challenges through the court system. Do you have a list of attorneys? Because it's always hard to find attorneys when you are talking to parents with children with disabilities. It's just not a large, people don't get in that type of law. So do you have?
We do. We do. Yeah, and if you contact me, I can hook you with our person who can. We've been really lucky in getting a lot of pro bono support from big law firms that have helped us, and I think there's always room for more.
Hi, good morning. As a former ARC board member in the state of Utah many, many years ago, and we don't have a chapter now, so it's very sad. But I appreciate the historical work of the ARC. I'll be very blunt. This is a safe place. I don't know, we're online too. Maybe not. You said optimistic and hopeful. And I mean, I'm not, so I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
I get
I'm
it.
also perimenopausal, so that may be a combo there. Girls will find that entertaining. It is true.
You have to go on TikTok to the We Do Not Care Club.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting there, believe me. So my question is, you mentioned this, you said, look, this cuts whether they have a direct name on a specific group, they will collapse our healthcare system. I mean, we're hearing, I'm going to be the moderator for this huge plenary session in a national conference of legislators. I mean, Kaiser Permanente will collapse. There are going to be closures across all service providers. What does that mean for the population that we're talking about? I mean, really, it's hard enough to get, you mentioned rural hospitals and delivering a baby and not having access. I mean, for some of this specifically will not have anywhere to go. What is the next step? I mean, so let's say July 4th is the deadline, and I'm hearing they will meet that deadline. What's next? Is it just like, oh, we'll take it, let the legislators that are not in session now?
No.
Because we won't go.
So July 4th is when the Senate needs to do its version. Correct. And then because the House version and the Senate version will be different, they have what's called a conference committee to try to reconcile the differences and come up with a unified bill. That takes time. Then the unified bill has to be passed by the House and in the same form by the Senate, and then it can go to the president for his signature. All of those give us an opportunity, leading up to them, an opportunity to express exactly what you just said. And for us, it's interesting. There are things that there are Republicans who share our values who don't want to see these bad things happen. They absolutely exist. What they aren't comfortable yet doing is being public about that. They are comfortable doing that in private. And so the more that we can get done in private with public influence, right? Going to town halls, getting in the media, connecting them with advocates, all of that is giving us some momentum. It gives us momentum for delay. Delay is our friend, right? It gives us momentum to find the people they will listen to. And that's, I worked when I was at another organization. Another disability service organization. We had a really cool program called Agribility, and it was designed for farmers and ranchers with disabilities. Farming is a very dangerous. There's all this equipment. People they have spinal cord injuries and amputations and stuff. And so this program would like put a wheelchair lift on a tractor, or remodel your bathroom on the first floor so someone who had a spinal cord injury can still live in the farmhouse. And farmers want to be farmers. They don't want to be anything else. They're farmers. And so there was a very conservative Republican from Western Iowa who had a neighbor who got help by this program. He voted against us on everything except this one thing, because it mattered to somebody that he cared about. And so I think what we have to do between now and whenever the end is find that person and support that person to be the messenger. Because I think the message is getting out. I think the message is getting out. But are we connecting the right messenger to the right target? And that's where we all have more work to do. So that's why I'm optimistic, because I know that those people exist and that people will hear them.
So you're not, and last question, and thank you for that. And you're right, strategically, I think that sounds reasonable. I guess my question is is your organization fearful of retaliation, one, in terms of advocacy? And two, do you think, because what I'm seeing is very, what you will say, like proactive, especially legal counsel in many, even agencies within state government, because they're so afraid of the retaliation that they're like ahead. I mean, the bill hasn't passed and they're already making adjustments because it's like, it's coming. And I'm like, the bill has not passed. Like, you're not supposed to be changing anything. Right. So legislators are now, either calling a special session. That's the only way we can manage at this point, because we're not longer on session, many of us. So, I mean, I'm seeing, because of the fear of retaliation, which has never been a factor on the advocacy world at the level that I'm seeing it in my 30 years of experience, where now everybody's like, nope, we are moving ahead because it's coming. Are you seeing any of that, and if that's influencing you as an organization?
So it's something we talk about. And it's one of the reasons that we are being hypersensitive to, this is the policy, these are the consequences of the policy. And we're not getting into people's motivation, whether they're evil or pure or whatever. This is the policy, these are the consequences of the policy. And I will say, for us as advocates, and I don't mean to be, I think about those families that sued the state of Pennsylvania in the 70s so their kid could go to school. Nobody wants to go down that road, right? But it's a tool that's available to us. And am I afraid for the ARC? I not really, if you want the honest truth. I think that we have a treasured and storied history of being advocates. And if people want to come after us because we are advocates for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, here we are, right? Do I want to lead with my chin and be stupid? No, I do not. Are we really careful about what we say in the press, what our publications say, what our action alerts say? Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are really afraid, and understandably so. We can't. What we're trying to be is not stupid, right? We want to be strategic and thoughtful. I was in New York 10 days ago, and they had a direct service provider, staff member that was getting this award, and she'd done all these wonderful things, and they asked her if she wanted to say a couple words, and she said, "Yes, thank you for giving me the space to do what I love." And I think, direct these people are the unsung heroes of unsung heroes, right? They are, and I thought that was wonderful. And then they had this woman who was in her early 40s, who had intellectual disabilities, who was married and had 2 daughters that were in college. And she worked really, really hard to get a driver's license. Like, she studied and did all the work and took the training and got on her own a driver's license. And I thought, so we're not standing up for them, right? I think it's what's your why? Our why is not to be afraid. Our why is to do what we need to do to create policies so people can live the lives of their choosing. And it's sausage making, right? But I also don't think that the majority of the American people are hateful, evil, spiteful people. I don't. I think we see the extremes in the media. I don't think people's neighbors really want to make somebody else's life harder. I just don't. And so our being vocal and being present and tenacious helps bring them along. I think one of the other things, I was at a meeting last week, and there's polling that show that 75% of Americans have no idea what's in this bill. So that's also part of our job, is to try to help elevate the knowledge base of people so that they can care.
Does anybody else have a question? Oh, yeah, here we go.
A couple of us was speaking this morning about how our legislature is set up. I don't have staff. So do y'all have like a template of a letter? Because I'm not a wordsmith either. I don't know how to, do you have like a letter that, with all this succinctly put on there, and then I could kind of finesse it to make it more personal?
Absolutely, yeah. It's on
send
our
it to my my delegation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Katie? Oh, thank you, Katie. Okay, well, we got through the morning, everybody. We have just a couple of things before we go to lunch. First of all, there's a co-chair of this event, a Republican partner with Representative Taylor, who came just a little bit late, and I want to give him a chance to say hello. Representative Penner, do you want to introduce yourself?
I guess I have 2 things to apologize for. First is for being late. Second is for standing between you and lunch. Years ago in the Marine Corps, one of the, you learn a lot of leadership skills in the Marines, and one of them is to recognize when you're standing between somebody and something they want. And lunch is one of those things where I always try not to be long-winded, but I do want to thank you for being here today. I do understand there's 12 different states represented, which is amazing. I want to say thank you to Representative Taylor for pulling this together and inviting me to be part of this. Came to my office, sat down. We had a great conversation about our shared backgrounds. Representative Farivar for stepping in as well. Just a little bit about the shared background, why this conversation matters to me, and why I think it, coming off the last discussion, I think it's really important that we have a unified front. I even hate to say the word bipartisan, because I think most people don't want an association with any party. I think most people want to live their lives and work through the crisis that they're working through every single day. My personal connection here, and I know that we all can share one. I have 4 children, but my 2 boys. My oldest, Matthew, lives with autism, profound, level 3. If you pick what people might associate with autism, that's describing Matthew. It's a very intensive to take care of Matthew every day, requires just an immense amount of support. Last night, I was laying down with Matthew after a serious escalation with a lump in my throat, angry at circumstance. Not at any individual person, it was no one's fault, but you just go to bed angry and want to cry and be frustrated at the world. And then my younger boy, Luke, we knew from the day he was born, he was going to have a really challenging life. He had a really profound brain injury at birth and lives with cerebral palsy every day and requires a different sort of support every single day. And I did not know that, 15 years after Matthew was born, 13 years after Luke was born, I was going to be in the legislature talking about support, lifetime support. And what I've discovered in this conversation is that our systems of care, I don't even know where to start. I've been, since we got out in May, just going and engaging in community care, residential care, institutional care, just trying to understand the systems, because I know that that's the first step in me folding into some sort of solution. And I just have to take a step back after every conversation, every time I visit a new facility, and go, oh my God, there's so much work to do here. But if you imagine, we've probably all heard, and I'll be really quick here. If you have a bunch of people who are blind and an elephant standing in front of them, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to talk about elephants. You have an elephant standing in front of them, and you ask them to feel a part of the elephant. Somebody will tell you this elephant, it's long and slithery, and it feels like a snake because they're grabbing the tail or the trunk. And someone will tell you it's stout and it's big and it's heavy because they're grabbing the foot. And someone will tell you it's kind of wet and squishy because they're grabbing its lips and its mouth. And they're all right. And I think about this problem is we all come at it from a different angle, and we can all describe what the barriers are and why it is so immense, and the things we can define ourselves through our differences, because Lord knows we have enough differences. But there are things that we can agree on, and we can share, and we can describe that elephant if we're all sharing. So who's in here grabbing a piece of the elephant who's not in here that's grabbing a piece of the elephant that can help us understand the system a little bit better? I know this is the first time that I've been part of this conversation, and I think that's my challenge for the next time is how do we make sure that other pieces of this elephant can be described so we can all figure out the solution. So thank you for being here, and I'll be here a little bit each day. I apologize for being late, and I look forward to meeting all of you. Thank you, Rep. Taylor. Thank you, Rep. Farvar.
Thank you, Rep. Penner.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to keep you further from lunch. Just a couple of things. Rep. Taylor would like to get a group photo before lunch. If we could kind of gather up here, that'd be great. Lunch will be downstairs where you had breakfast. Rep. Taylor will be mingling with you all. Please spend more time in conversation. We'll be back here about 1 o'clock, if that's okay. Thanks.
All right. Can we switch to the summit logo?
All right. Short in the front, tall in the back. We have multiple phones.